want to know which planet was causing your suffering? How about Earth?
Hey everyone, Brantflakes here, back with a new Shadowverse 2 video. For today's video, I'm going to go through every forest and every neutral set card and explain where I would put them in your mulligan priority, how viable they are in forest decks, and just give a very brief, hopefully brief, explanation of how you play them in the game and what they do. And if you guys want to see the TLDR summary of it, I'll post the tier list here. Keep in mind that there are like 2 or 3 cards missing from this tier list because the tier list maker I used didn't have everything. I think specifically Stray Beastman and Wild Profusion are missing from the forest side. And I put Stray Beastman into B tier and Wild Profusion also into B tier. And I'll explain why when I get to them. But going straight into the video, because I'll know this will be a very long one if I don't move my butt. The very first card we'll talk about is going to be May, Journey Elf. She's a 1-mana 1/1. She is going to be required in every current deck you can play with Forest, and I would maybe keep her in some of your mulligans. She is a fanfare combo card, which means that if she is your 3rd card played, she will generate a new effect. Her new effect is going to be dealing 3 damage to any follower on the field. Again, this is, if you're confused with what combo 3 means, it literally just means 3rd card or later played. So if you played 2 fairies, you can play May. So the reason why she is really good and you maybe keep her is because she really swings aggro or tempo or like curve plays into your favor because she is so damage efficient. Almost nothing in the game that is 3 mana or below survives May. So she can kill stuff really easily, and it's still a 1/1 that your opponent has to deal with, and taking damage from force players is always really scary. She's just not a guaranteed keep in your mulligan because sometimes you just don't have the activators for her. The next card is going to be another 1-mana 1/1. It's going to be Good Fairy of the Pond. When it dies, it'll add a fairy to your hand. A fairy is going to be a 1-mana token that has 1/1 in stats and rushes. And then when you play Aria, we'll cover later, that rush will turn into Storm. So Good Fairy of the Pond is required in every forest deck right now, and it is an always keep in mulligan. You will always play this card turn 1 if you can, and the reason why it's so good is because it generates a fairy for free, and it's just a very safe play. Often, Good Fairy of the Pond will like slap your opponent in the face once or twice, and if you end up with perfect lethal, like 10 turns down the road, it's because Good Fairy of the Pond was playable. I wouldn't say you throw away your entire hand for Good Fairy of the Pond, but you're definitely keeping it every time you see it in your hand. Bug Alert is going to be a 1-mana spell. You can only play the spell when you have another card on the field, whether that be followers or amulets, and you will return that card to your hand. And then after you return it, it'll deal 2 damage to any random follower. So you can't play this on empty fields. This is required right now in all decks, and I would never keep it in mulligan unless you know exactly what you're doing with a very specific play. But even then, I'd argue that it's probably not worth it. I think this is the only 1-mana card in Forest's entire current collection that you would maybe drop down to 2 copies instead of 3, just because it is a bit awkward. But it's so efficient when it's good that you're always going to take it anyways. Your next 1-mana spell is going to be Fairy Convocation. All it does is add 2 fairies to your hand. Again, fairies are 1-mana 1/1 rushes, and that's all it does. You're required to play 3 in your deck, and you will sometimes keep this in your mulligan. I think you only keep this in mulligan if you have a very good reason to. For example, you have a Godwood Staff or you have a May, and you don't really want to risk going for a Fairy Tamer, like you like a Fairy Tamer in hand. If you have a Fairy Tamer, you will rarely keep Fairy Convocation. That doesn't necessarily mean you're upset to see it in your hand post-mulligan, but it's just because it's much better later on in the game than it is early on, especially if you already have a lot of Fairy generators early on. Fairy Tamer is going to be your first 2-mana card for Forest. 2-mana 1/1. When you play it, it adds 2 copies of fairies to your hand. So it's essentially Fairy Convocation, except it's +1 mana to play a 1/1 body. This is 3 required every deck. You always keep it in mulligan because it's very hard to get rid of this card efficiently later in the game. This card is only awkward because it generates so much raw value and it's 2 mana. So if you have like 7 cards in your hand and you play Fairy Tamer and you have Godwood Staff, you can very quickly have too many cards in your hand, and the 9-card hand limit will burn you cards. But sometimes it just be like that. You're going to play this card anyways because when you get it early, it's super good. And even later on, if your hand is slightly smaller, you have no problem with generating more fairies than you need. Stray Beastman is a 2-mana 2/2. When you play it, it increases your combo by 1. So that essentially means that if you play this and then you play something like Lily or May or Faye, that will technically be your third card. This card is not required at all in any forest deck, and I think you would keep him in Mulligan, but only if you have a combo card. I don't think he's very good. You could play him if you're new to the deck and you just want to get used to the combos, but his effect is so benign that I don't think he's great. Because what Beastman does is covered by just playing 2 fairies. And obviously you can't have 2 fairies, but odds are you'll have 2 1-mana cards, and at that point Beastman is just completely obsolete because those 2 mana cards will do something as well as give you the combo, while straight Beastman is just a card that will die. And maybe not die, but won't do much. So I would recommend playing straight Beastman once you're used to Forest. Faye Twinkletoes is going to be a 2-mana 2/1 Fanfare combo 3. Give all other allied followers on the field +1/+1, not including itself. So when you play Faye, it will just be a 2/1 no matter what, unless you have another buff to buff Faye. This is a card that you can play. It's basically required if you're playing Aria. Most lists will only play 2. You could play 3 for maximum consistency, but I've seen certain lists that don't run Aria drop down to 1. The reason why Faye shows up in that much consistency, I guess, across all decks is just because playing Faye early with, like, on turn 4, if you play Fairy, Fairy, Faye, you'll clear almost every board in the game, no problem, and you will always maintain Faye no matter what afterwards. And if you manage to buff up a full board, you can swing for 4 damage or 6 damage instantly on turn 4, and that will be game ending for a lot of crafts. So it's more of the highest peak of Faye is really, really strong, and the low range of Faye is just that she's like a 2-mana card that you can just play as a vanilla 2/1 to pressure your opponent. And she also has extra value with Aria, we'll cover later on for obvious reasons. Baby Carbuncle is going to be a 2-mana 2/2. When you play it, it's going to bounce a card on the field. Note that you can play this if there's nothing on your field. It will just not flip anything, obviously. And the main benefit of this is the Super Vol effect, where you recover 3 mana / 3 PP. And I'll talk about why that's really important later on with Roach. Or I guess just now. This card is the closest you're going to get to a required card in Forest, but it's still basically required in my opinion, because it's only good for advancing the main Roach game plan. Baby Carbuncle is not very good with Aria, in my opinion. It's not very good if you're playing like fairy-focused stuff, because you don't really want to bounce your fairies very often unless you have Aria active. But if you're waiting that long to bounce your fairies, then it's not very good. And also, if you're being forced to keep this 2-mana card in your hand, you'll run into the hand issues I keep talking about. However, the peak of Baby Carbuncle is so insanely high. Essentially, when you super evolve it, you're gaining back 3 mana, which is essentially a free Roach play. And then you're also getting the super evolve 5 damage effect, and you're able to clear a lot of taunts or like ping 1 damage to face. So you're not only not losing your full super evo effect, like you're losing only 2 damage if you kill something. You're also gaining a lot of damage through the extra combo it generates. So imagine a world where, I mean, you don't have to imagine a world. There's gonna be plenty of videos, plenty of clips, plenty of like games you play with Baby Carbuncle where you'll get like a 20 damage combo on turn 8, which shouldn't be possible, but because of Baby Carbuncle, it is possible. And obviously that does require a lot of 0 mana cards to pair along with it, but the reach you gain with Roach combos when you have Baby Carbuncle is insanely high. I guess I should mention that you never keep this in Mulligan. Ever, I think. You always want to draw into it, which is the reason why it's a little inconsistent. But if you ever get a real Baby Carbuncle combo off, you'll realize why it's so popular. The max level, like the max peak of this card is so insane. I personally don't play it just because I tried it before and it felt really awkward to use outside those mega combos. And instead I play Sprite or Capricious Sprite. But I think there are a lot of lists that will run only 1 or 2 or even 3 Carbuncles and just go for the main Roach gameplay loop. And it's really consistent because of how much extra reach you have over normal Roach decks that don't have a Baby Carbuncle. Lily is going to be a 2-mana 1/3 with a Fanfare combo 3. Select a follower on the field and reduce its HP to 1. And then when you evolve her, not only do you draw a card, you can also ping an enemy follower and deal 1 damage to it. So you can see how this card is really, really strong. For me, this follower is second only to Glade when it comes to board control and raw efficiency, because you're assassinating one card on the enemy field, and then you're also keeping a 3/5 body to swing with. So Lily can clear a lot of boards early on very easily, even without her combo effect. But it's just really funny when like somebody plays like a 8-10 taunt, and then you Lily it and it dies, and you swing for 6 damage because they played the taunt hoping you would throw everything into it, but you didn't because you have Lily. Lily is a card that you are required to play no matter what, and you sometimes keep in your mulligan. I think Lily as a raw turn 2 play isn't too bad, because a 1/3 is very, very difficult to get rid of in this game. And if you manage to buff her with a Lambent Cairn or Fae, she ends up doing a lot of damage overall. And if somehow she lives into the evolution phase, she can do even more damage and still be super efficient, because you can ping off a lot of cards with the extra fairies and the Lily Evo effect while continuing to draw and get into your actual better cards. So Lily is going to be guaranteed 3 copies a deck, in my opinion, and she's just super efficient. Wild Profusion is going to be a really weird card. It's a 2-mana amulet, I think is what they're called. It's a 2-mana summon, essentially. And what it does is that when you play it, it adds 1 fairy to your hand, and then while it is active on your field, every time you play a pixie follower, which for now is solely fairies, it deals 1 damage to a random enemy follower. I tried playing this card before, and honestly, I don't think it's very good after playing it a lot. It is pretty decent against very heavy aggro decks, but you run out of fairies very quickly when you're playing Wild Profusion this way, and instead of relying on Wild Profusion to clear a board, you could just play fairies and Evo stuff, or play Glade. So in a deck that is already so full of board control, a card that clogs up your board and isn't even really efficient, and also just lasts barely 2 turns, isn't that great. It griefs you later on in the game, because if you play it later, you might not be able to get lethal because it's still on your board. And a lot of minions later in the game don't even care about Wild Profusion, because there's either too many minions for it to ping properly, or they're too beefy to the point where you're just going to play your Bayles, Lilies, and Fays, or Maze anyways. So it's decent for a tech card, but it's not even decent. It's less than decent for a tech card. It's pretty awkward, but if you're traumatized by like Sword, Abyss, or Face Dragon players, maybe it has a place. Lambent Cairn is going to be another 2-mana amulet. When you play it, you're going to add a fairy to your hand, and if you hit combo 3, it's going to add a Deepwood Bounty to your hand. Deepwood Bounty is a 0-mana card, a 0-mana spell that restores 1 HP to your leader. And then when you engage the amulet, it poofs, and you can buff 1 allied follower with 1/1. This is a required card to play 3 of in any, I think it's required at least, to play 3 of in any forest deck right now, because of how dependent we are on Roach. But I don't think you keep it in mulligan. This card is barely okay to play on turn 3 because you force summon its 2/2 fairy. But the main value of the card is the Deepwood Bounty. With Roach, when we get to it, you'll see how fast it can stack up with 0-mana cards that are played. And Lambent Cairn, along with Bayle, will be the main reason why you can hit insane damage thresholds with Bayle or with Roach. And you can cheese your way through a lot of games with proper Lambent Cairn usages and management. This is probably the hardest card to learn how to use properly in the craft, in my opinion. Even I don't know how to use it quite super efficiently. But if you watch, there's a few Japanese YouTubers, or yeah, a few Japanese Force players that stream on YouTube a lot. And they'll have gameplay and stuff if you want to just like watch them and see how they play Cairn and understand how they generate the most amount of value from it to generate their really nutty Roach turns. Next card is going to be Capricious Sprite. This is the card that I'm running over Carbuncle, and I'll explain why in a bit. It is a 3-mana 1/1. When you play it, you summon a fairy, and you also add a fairy to your hand. And then when you evolve her, she'll repeat that fanfare, summoning a fairy and adding a fairy to your hand. You can treat this card sort of like a fairy tamer, and you pay the 1-mana cost of summoning that extra fairy up front. So all the problems that fairy tamer had, you're going to run into with this card as well. It's more expensive, it still clogs up your hand a little bit, but the reason why I like it more than Carbuncle is because I personally just like having that extra body on the field, and also generating fairies is never bad when you're playing Aria, and I like playing Aria. You'll never play Carbuncle. Oh, right. You also probably keep this in your hand if you have a good turn 1, turn 2 play. But in my opinion, you probably mulligan this if you don't have a turn 1, turn 2 play. If you have a turn 1 play, You could keep it just because a lot of your good turn 1 plays do involve generating fairies, so you will have something to bridge the gap between turn 1s and 3, but it's not that excellent, it's just very efficient. I think evolving Cupid Sprite does feel a bit bad, but the evolution is super, super efficient because you gain so many fairies, which again, are really helpful for Aria and can be very helpful for roaches later on. She's not the best card, but it's been really fun playing her, so I'll take her. The next 3 mana card is going to be Working Grasshopper, 3 mana 2/1, and fanfare is that when you play it, you draw an X cost follower with X being your combo. This is not a card that's played very often, and you would probably keep this in mulligan if you played it. No, I don't think you would. Actually, you could, because you could just play it raw and then force draw your 1 mana card, so it could be okay even to keep in mulligan. The reason why people played this card in the past was because they would tutor the Roach straight out of their deck, because this would often be the only, or Roach would be the only other 3 cost you have in your deck. So you only play 1 copy of this, and it would just make your deck a little more consistent. I guess you could always just draw your extra good fairies or maze if you really wanted to, and it would help you get less bad draws in the future in case, like, on turn 9 you draw a good fairy and you're just depressed about it. But it's not a good enough effect to justify playing it, especially when the meta is as high octane as it is. Roach, Roach, Roach. The next 3 mana card is going to be the namesake of most decks right now in Forest. It's going to be Killer Rhinoceroach. It is a 3 mana 0/2 follower, and then when you play it, it gives the follower attack according to your combo, and it has Storm. This means you can play like 7 cards in 1 turn, which is a lot easier than you'd expect. In certain cases. And then when you play the Roach as your 8th card, it will be an 8/2 for 3 mana. And then if you have a second Roach, or if you bounce it with Godwood, you'd have a 9/2 Roach for 3 mana. So you can see very quickly how this card becomes really absurd really quickly. It does require a little bit of learning and counting because you have to add up linearly. It is +1 damage per card you play. But when you're juggling, like trying to clear a board and trying to generate more cards to add to the Roach, it can get out of hand. So a big skill of this gameplay loop is learning how to count Roach, like counting your fingers to get to 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, etc. You never keep this in mulligan, by the way. You always drop Roaches from your hand because it's such a terrible card to have early on. But you will always play 3 because you need that raw consistency of drawing your first, second Roach to even win games. Amataz is going to be the first Forest Legendary we go over. It's going to be a 3 mana 2/2. Fanfare, give this follower more stats according to the number of Pixie followers in your hand. Again, Pixies are going to be fairies. It also has Ward, and when you Evo Amataz, it's going to ping the enemy board for the amount of fairies that you have. I've never seen this card evolved. I think this card is kind of okay if you're trying to cheese and you believe in the heart of the cards and that you have like good fairy into fairy tamer into Amataz, or you have fairy convocation into good fairy into Amataz, like more games out of 0. He's very, very bad late game. He's very mid in the mid game because big bodies are really easy to kill. But if you get the dream where it's like where you have like turn 1 fairy convocation, turn 2 coin fairy tamer fairy convocation, turn 3 play like a 10/10 Amataz for fun. It's like he can get really disgusting and he might win you games on the spot, but he provides so little value outside of that I win the game now play on turn 3, which might not even win you in the game most of the time. The next 3 cost card is going to be a spell called Fragrant Wood Whispers. It's going to add a Deepwood bounty to your hand and draw your card. This card is not required at all. You would always mulligan it. I think there is a very small argument that you could play it to add Deepwood bounties to your hand so that you can generate more Roach value. But the big difference between Fragrant Wood Whispers and Lambent Cairn is that Lambent Cairn is 3 mana to play a 1 or a 2/2 fairy that actually does something to the board and has the upside of giving you a Deepwood bounty. Whereas Fragrant Wood is, all things considered, very expensive for Forest players, and your upside is getting a Deepwood bounty that you might get to play, might not get to play, but trying to find a slot for it in the fairy cards is really difficult to the point where I don't think it's worth considering at all. Godwood Staff is going to be a 3 mana amulet. At the end of your turn, if you've played 3 cards, you can draw a card, and when you engage it, you destroy the card and flip something on your board back to your hand. Godwood Staff is honestly kind of an interesting card because it's not very great if you draw perfectly. If you draw a perfect game in Forest, 20 out of 20 times, Godwood Staff would not be in your preferred perfected draw. However, if you have since Forest has so many conditional cards, you often have turns where you feel like you can't play anything, in which case Godwood Staff is like the perfect card to play because it gives you so much card draw. It substitutes as an extra roach. So instead of having only 3 roaches in your deck and you're only like you can't kill people because you only have 1 roach, this essentially functions as your second roach in a lot of scenarios. And that's really important because double roach will be how you end like 90% of your games. And so if you had to draw 2 roaches every game, it'd be really hard. But Godwood Staff not only functions as second roach, it helps you draw more so you can keep clearing less efficiently than your opponent, but still maintain a lot of card efficiency because you're just drawing an extra card every turn. The only issue with Godwood Staff is that it's really hard to use more than 1. So if you draw 2 or 3, if you draw 3, your game's basically over. Drawing 2 feels pretty bad, but there are some games where you're allowed to play the second one, so you have a lot of card engine or card draw, and then you just burn the second Godwood Staff to like bounce of May to kill something. So it is possible to play a few. I personally, you are kind of required to keep this. I've seen one tournament deck that didn't play Godwood Staff at all, which is why I'm saying that it is theoretically likely that Godwood Staff is not really required, but because you can't draw perfectly every game, it is required. It is an okay card to keep in your hand if you have a turn 1, turn 2, and a separate turn 3. I think I wouldn't keep Godwood Staff if your hand's already very heavy because you do need to be on the board as Forest early on, or else you'll occasionally just die to nothing. But if you have really good plays in your other, like if you have good plays in 2 out of 4 of your mulligan slots, you could keep it just to be greedy, but sometimes it's not that good. Gentle Treant, 4 mana, 4/4, Fanfare of all the Follower. If you hit something, you heal 2. I don't think this card's ever going to be played. Maybe if we get more 0 mana cards, but if you get more 0 mana cards, then you'd rather just play Roach and accelerate Roach. So I think theoretically this card could be okay. You're essentially getting a, like if you had 6 mana, you could play this. It'd be a 4 mana, 6/6, heal 2. But it's too expensive. You need to evolve it to do anything. It's just not that good for Forest ever. And you would never keep it in mulligan. Another 4 mana card, Elder Sagebrush, 3/5, also useless. Fanfare, deal 3 damage to random follower. If you combo, you deal 3 to 3 instead. It cannot target the same minion 3 times, so if there's a 9 health mana or 9 health minion on the board, you will not be killing it, you'll just deal 3. It's a crap body, has no evo effect, doesn't help your Roach game plan. Don't play this card, trash. Jumping straight into your 5 cost cards, 5 mana 5/5 Glade, Fragrant Wood Ward. Playing it draws you 2 cards, evolving it deals X damage split between all enemy followers, X being the number of cards you have in your hand. It is very important to note that the way this game works is that every time someone plays a card, on your side of the field, right is the most recently played card, and left is the earliest or the latest card played. And Glade will always target right to left, and Glade's effect does 0 to barriers no matter what. So Glade is literally one of the best cards in the game. He's the cheap version of Sylvia and Olivia essentially. So when you play him, what will happen a lot of times is that you'll play him and you'll have 8 cards in hand if you play him on curve. Sometimes you'll have 6, in that case you have to swing with him, which is even that big of a deal. But what will happen a lot is that you'll play Glade, like the enemy will have super evoed, or rather regular evo something, and then you play Glade, and then you evo, and you clear their board. Glade is such a powerful board clearer in most of the scenarios he's played that his rush effect from being evolved is usually irrelevant, and even if it is relevant, it's like, it just means that you get a full clear with Glade. You can clear a pretty big board with 1 card played. So this card, I think you do keep him in your hand if you have good, like 2 good plays for an early game, but I think if you have nothing else, you do mulligan him unless you're in a matchup where if your opponent plays a turn 5 card and you have no response and you just lose, that's the only time you would keep him mulligan, even if you have no other good plays, in my opinion. You always play 3 of these cards in any Force deck too. Aria. Aria is going to be your next Force Legendary. 6 mana, 4/4. When you play her, you gain a crest. This is the crest that gives your allied pixie followers, aka fairies, storm. And then when you super evolve her, you summon 3 fairies, which will all have that storm effect. This is a card that I like playing a lot. I think the card is really pretty, but I think more objectively in gameplay, she is pretty good as just the base 4/4 if your opponent has nothing, because you get so much chip damage from the fairies. The Super Evo effect can be 4 damage from her alone, because you get the 1 damage ping from Super Evo kills, and then the 3 fairies as well. The only issue is that she isn't a terribly efficient Super Evo. Like, if you look at a lot of other Super Evos in the game, like Olivia or a lot of the other crafts, their Super Evos are like game-defining, whereas Aria's is just another win con, which can be game-defining if it works out for you, but she isn't terribly efficient. So, because of that, in my opinion, mixing Carbuncle and Aria is a little awkward. You could argue that you only play one Aria if you play any Carbuncles, which is kind of fine. But the reason why I say that Aria and Carbuncles don't mix very well is because Carbuncle doesn't really interact very good with Aria. Carbuncle interacts very well with the rest of your deck, like the roaches and sometimes the fairies, but Aria herself will never want to be bounced. Playing 2 feels really bad when you draw the second one, because the second one is effectively useless. However, the fairies can be a really good win con. I've won plenty of games where I drew 0 roaches because I got to play Aria and I got to hit my enemy with the face. And since I'm already playing 3 roaches, it's not like I'm denying myself a roach draw, because I already have the 3 roaches and they're buried somewhere in my deck. So, big ups to Aria, my favorite card in the game, but she's not super required. She's just something you can play in Forest. Selwyn, the Sonic Archer, is going to be your 7 mana follower card, 4/6 with Storm. When you super evolve it, you bounce an enemy follower and return them to your hand. This card was played a little bit early on when the game first came out, but it's very quickly fallen out of favor just because 7 mana to bounce an enemy card, while it can be good, it's not really that great. I went 30 games and I only got 1 good Selwyn play. And when that happened, I decided to just drop him. He can have very niche moments where he's just insanely powerful, but with Forest, you already have like 15 ways to murder any given taunt on the board. So Selwyn can have a really high peak, but the odds are very high that you would have just killed that minion anyways. And you're wasting a super evolve to let them play a minion that probably has a fanfare effect again. There are very few cards in this game that don't have a fanfare effect or don't have a good evolution. So Selwyn the Sonic Archer is kind of mid in that regard. The next 7 mana card is going to be Aerin, the Crystalline Frost Ward. She is a 7 mana 6/8 with Ward, and when you play her, she executes one enemy follower and restores 2 HP to your leader. Aerin is a card that I've seen played in a few lists, so I guess she is playable. But I watched one of the top JP Shadowverse or Force players stream for like 3 hours, and then reviewed their VOD out of curiosity. They played 1 copy of Aerin. Aerin was drawn 10 times out of that entire 3 to 4 hour stream, and she didn't do anything. She was played 3 times, and she did nothing in all 3 games. So in a 3-hour session, I think it was actually a 5-hour session. In a 5-hour session, Aerin did literally nothing. That is to say that Aerin does have some pretty good feel-good moments because you execute a big minion and you have a ward and then deal with it. But she is genuinely like not great for the most part, so I would not bother playing her. 8 mana card, Deepwood Fairy Beast, 4/4, play it, draw a card, heal your leader according to the number of cards you have in hand. I've never seen anyone play this. This card is absolute dog water. Do not play it. Bayle is going to be your next 8 mana card, something you actually will play. He is a 4/4. Whenever anything dies on your field, every time it leaves the field, which includes bounce effects, you reduce the mana cost of the card by 1, and then when you play Bayle, it deals 4 damage to any selected enemy follower. This is a card that you will almost always keep in Mulligan if you have a good early game, and you will always play 3, because this card is total BS when he works. He is very often your 0 mana fuel for your roach combos, and even if you have to, or rather, if you're forced to play him early on in the match, he will generate a lot of value because the tempo swing from playing Bayle and maybe super evoing him or evoing him is pretty high. Obviously, you'd rather super evo something else, but because you're playing him for like 0 to 3 mana anyways, you're likely gonna be able to super evo your preferred minion over Bayle to begin with. 9 mana legendary opulent Rose Queen, 6/6 fanfare. Transform all of your forest cards in your hand that cost 1 or less into Bramble Burst. Bramble Burst is going to be a 1 mana spell that deals 3 to any follower or the enemy leader. And she also has ward. So this card is really bad because she's 9 mana, do nothing. Like, if you have 10 mana, you're gonna deal 3 damage. That's not good enough for a late game card. I think a lot of people want this card to be good, but she's literally useless. Like, if you play 9 mana do nothing, unless it's a top deck situation, you'll just lose the game. And if it was a top deck situation, that means you have no cards for Bramble Bush to work. So, card advantage in this game is pretty fake. Everyone always has cards. So, you can't really run people out of cards and then play this. You'll have to just deal with the cards that come out, and Rose Queen will be really bad for that. And yeah, that's going to be all the force cards. This video is already getting pretty long, so I'll only cover the neutral cards that I think are worth talking about. If I don't mention it, don't ever play it. With that said, first neutral card we'll talk about is going to be Leia, Bellringer Angel, otherwise known as Ding Dong. She is a 2 mana 0/2 ward card that has the death effect of drawing a card, and if you evolve her, she'll draw you a card. Leia was played a decent amount early on in the Roach decklist lifespan just because she had some decent usages, but she's been cycled out as the decks have become more refined. She is a pretty safe card just to slam in if you don't know what to do, but I think there's a lot of refined decks out there now that you won't ever be playing Leia if you don't want to. Ruby, 2 mana 2/2, fanfare, select a card in your hand, return to deck, and then draw a card. Ironically, Ruby is pretty good in Forest because you'll often have cards that you can't really play, whether that be bug alerts with no good bounce targets, or your secondary Aria, or second or third carbuncle. Ruby is decent in those cases, but it's ironic saying that the cards that you want to bounce with Ruby are often the cards that you're playing Ruby over. So while she does have some pretty good anti-brick effects on your hand, she's not that great. I think you would probably play like 2 of her at most, and you would keep her in all of your mulligans because you'd be able to fix your hand on that turn 2 play, but she isn't carrying your deck. She's making your deck technically more consistent in a different way than Carbuncle would. Honorable mentions on this screen would be Apollo, just because Apollo is really good for anti-aggro, but you have fairies anyway, so who cares? Seraphic Tidings would be okay if we already didn't have insane card generation and card draw. Part of me really wants Adventurer's Guild to be good, but Force is not the deck for that. And then the only real card you'll ever gonna want to play as a neutral is going to be Olivia, Heroic Dark Angel. She is the 7 mana legendary. I crafted 2 of these cards. Like, that's how good I think she is. She's a 4/4. When you play her, you draw 2 cards, you heal 2 HP, and you recover 2 play points. So she's essentially a 5 mana 4/4 that you can only play from turn 7 and beyond unless you have a coin. And her super evolve effect is that you select another allied follower and super evolve it as well. It's important to note that unless that super evolved minion has a death effect, you won't gain any value that you would otherwise gain from super evolving it. Like, unless that card has a very specific status change, I think. Even status changes might not be affected. I think it's literally only death rattle effects that are activated by Olivia. The reason why this card is really, really strong is because it's essentially your only quote-unquote mid-range card. It helps you draw, it helps you heal out of ranges of certain things, and it provides you a very good way of stabilizing the board if you don't have another way to stabilize it. So if someone has like Olivia, if someone has their own Olivia, or like they're playing Kuon or playing Orchards or something, Olivia is a great way to just clear those 2 minions, and at that point you just hope that the enemy doesn't have another set of those cards. But yeah, she's just really efficient because she does everything, and she can even buff a Roach to deal 4 to face. Like, that's how what's the word, versatile she is. It does feel bad to have 2 Olivias because your super evolves will be probably consumed by both Olivias, and you'd rather have a super evolve for your Roach. But she's such a good card that if it comes down to that, and you're ahead on super evolve tempo, and you know for a fact that will end your opponent if you do so, you might as well just do it. She's a really good card for that alone. I am missing a few cards created, like Fildo. You wouldn't play this in Forest, but it's an honorable mention. And Cocutus, you'd never play in Forest because you don't want to ruin your Roach combo with it. So yeah, that's going to be the video. Thanks for sticking around this long. I know it's a very long video if you stayed up until this point, but hopefully just the yapping in the background was relaxing or educational if you stayed this far. I won't put timestamps, sadly, because it's too long a video to do so, but hopefully it was educational. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys next time. Hopefully I'll post gameplay for real. Bye bye.